Hi, and welcome back. It's part 2 of episode 2 of the History Hut. I'm Jim, this is Dr. K, and we were talking about the highlights of the Sung Dynasty. You have a couple more for us.
We were indeed. So one of the really important things in the Sung Dynasty is that because they've moved south, the political and the economic powers moved south, they have to drop that anti-Confucian thing about not liking merchants and trade because they need the tax revenues. So
government say?
Yeah, I know, GST everywhere. So all of a sudden, instead of saying, oh, merchants are bad and agriculture is the backbone of the community, they're like, okay, so who wants to be a trader? Who wants to be a millionaire? And so lots and lots of individuals start to get involved in trade. And this, of course, means that trade is expanded across the Silk Road that we talked about last time. And also trade is expanded by sea as well. And remember, we were talking about the Tang and a little bit, I suppose I should say, for the Sung as well, the improvements in ship technology. You had watertight compartments, double-hulled ships.
Very important for a ship,
especially
in the
if you're
water.
Sending rice out. You don't
Right,
want it
that's
to
a good
get
point.
wet.
Noodles,
and it would expand and blow up, probably
Bad
make a
news.
good bomb. So they start to tax trade. They're still keen on agriculture, and they open up the Yangtze River Valley. Two things that are important about that. First of all, they bring in Champa rice, which is a fast-growing strain of rice, so they can harvest twice a year. Really important. And the other thing is that they improve irrigation, and they have a thing called the dragon's backbone pump. It looks like a little step aerobic machine, and while you're stepping like crazy, you're on that little step thing. While you're doing that, it's throwing water up behind you. So incredibly healthy. Way ahead of their
Sounds
time.
like it.
Yeah, step machines, step aerobics before anybody else had thought about it. So, as I said, you get expansion along the Silk Road. You get the state keeps its monopoly of certain things, but more involvement of merchants. So you get a money economy, tons more flying money, credit in circulation, a lot more coin in circulation. They use copper coins for small purchases. So you would go out with your little fashion copper belt on. The copper would be like little dimes or something, and a little hole in the middle, and you go to the market and then you'd like hand it off. So if your wife was really bad, she maybe could run out and spend an entire belt's worth of money at the market. That's a possibility. I know, because I didn't actually have Visa, which I use. So great expansion of trade
product placement
by sea and by land. The opening up the Yangtze River Valley, and as I mentioned last time, all sorts of changes in seismographics, medicine. They're inoculating for smallpox, or so we believe. You could either take the dried scabs of the smallpox off the victim and then snort it like a drug. I won't say which one, or you could put it on the tip of a very, very thin gold needle and have it stuck subcutaneously just under your skin, because that's what subcutaneously means, under your skin, and then hopefully you wouldn't come down with the pox. So the result of all the economic activity is an increase in urbanization. More people are in the cities. The population rise is absolutely dramatic, and the downside of this is it seems to be a more conservative society. Centralization of control, remember, in the hands of the emperor, and then in the hands of the father, or the oldest male in the house. And one of the things that happens to women is women's status drops, and you often see this when you move into a money economy and women aren't actually kind of bringing any of that in, but are still working. So in this case, you get the introduction of foot binding, and it's really kind of particular at first to the Sung, following the courtesans. Really, really painful process. I start with girls when they're about 3 years old, and the idea is to get a foot that ends up being between 3 and 4 inches long. And so it's really kind of debilitating for women, and that actually lasts until the end of Imperial China. There's a movement against it in the late 1890s, and then it's kind of banned by about 1911, but still has an impact because there's lots of really, really old ladies that are still alive that would have been victims of that. So yeah, that's just some of the things I wanted to mention about the Sung.
Now enough about the Sung.
I know.
Let's talk a little Mongols.
terrible.
It kind of seems like they came out of nowhere, but that's obviously not the case.
That's right, and they're still around. That's the most frightening part. If I can say that, if you're not a Mongol, are you?
I don't
by
think I
descent?
am. No.
Probably a Viking. Are you probably a Viking
Probably.
by descent? It's
Yeah.
just almost as bad. There's still about 2.5 Mongols in Mongolia. Probably more outside
2.5?
Mongolia. 2.5 million.
Oh.
Oh, did I say 2.5?
You said 2.5.
Only, only
Yeah.
2.5.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
That's
that would
not
be
that many.
manageable.
Yeah.
That'd be manageable. No, 2.5 million in the 20th century, and there was a documentary about a set of DNA tests that were done. They tested 3 million Asian men in the 1990s. You know, cheek swabs, and they used the Y chromosome that doesn't change from man to son. You know, the male one, and they
Right.
discovered that 1 in every 200 were descended from Genghis Khan. So 8% of the population in the lands that the Mongols conquered are descendants of Genghis Khan. And one of the things I thought was funny about the documentary was that it was the guy that was helping with the film crew that was the one of the 200. So he was like, hey, Genghis, he's my man. So the Mongols, there are many different groups and subgroups in Inner and Outer Mongolia, that area that they're in, north of China. And the crazy thing is that they're known to the Chinese by a variety of different names. All the different dynasties, if you go back to the Han Dynasty, they called them the Xiongnu, and the Sui called them the Menggu, and the Tang called them the Menggu, and the Khitan, remember we talked about the Khitan being the Liao. The Southern Sun called them the Black Khitan, the Kayat, the Merkat. So we might not have known of them specifically all the time as by the term Mongol, but they're definitely all out there north of the wall and kind of scaring people. There's lots of different theories about who they are. There's at least 5 different theories about who they are and where they came from. The upshot is that they've been north of China for hundreds and hundreds of years by the time you get to the Tang and the Sung era. They were allied with the Chinese at different times, with different dynasties at different times, bought off at times, and even the Jin were involved with them. So here you had the Jin coming in and frightening everybody in the Sung Empire, and yet there's still people north of the wall that the Jin are like, oh no! and at one point, I think towards the end of the Jin period, the Jin actually give them 16 areas to settle in because of the help that they've given to them. Little do they know that they're soon to be coming after them.
Now, most of what I know about the Mongols comes from the great historian Keanu Reeves in his documentary Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Yes.
But what was life like for them before they became this world conqueror type?
Well, I think the saddest thing, and Keanu spotted that immediately, was that they didn't have, the one thing they didn't have that they really wanted was Twinkies. Because you'll remember from that documentary when they presented him with a Twinkie, they were actually able to move him into the time machine, and he was just Twinkie mad after that. So I think had they actually had access to Twinkies, you know, before this period, they might not have been so aggressive and out hunting the Eastern world for a thing that they couldn't even name. You know, they didn't have a written script, so they couldn't write it down.
You're a Twinkie, okay?
You know? That's all they were looking for. It was just a hunt for Twinkies. I don't know. Like, are there any other kind of Tim Hortons donuts or something? Maybe that would have outdone
Let's get back on track.
Okay, so
Doctor.
So anyway, these Mongols, lots of different theories about who they are, where they come from. They had their own idea about who they were, and of course, many peoples have a kind of nation myth or a creation myth, and their creation myth was that they were the result of a union between a blue wolf and a fallow deer somewhere up by the Oni River. Yeah, you know, and I always think, well, maybe that's why sometimes Genghis had a soft side. That was the fallow deer coming out, and, you know, rather than the wolfy part. But that would be mean to wolves because they're actually quite nice. So the Kayat, for instance, believed that in the past they'd been united under a line of strong men who they called Khans, Khan, and of course we'll see that with Genghis. They lived in the upper area of the Onon River, and they migrated to an area called Burkhan Khaldun, which I always think sounds like something out of Tolkien, like Mordor, They're from Mordor. We should have known they were baddies. So you have all these different groups, and I think the really important thing is that it's not until you get to Genghis Khan that you get someone who can unite all of them and then hold them together. So by about the late 1180s, Genghis's line, his father's line, Yasugi Khaldun, that's his dad's name, and then Genghis had subdued a number of these different groups, and they'd come to lead this one particular group, and quite a large group it was too. And to make an incredibly long story short, because there's a lot of toing and froing and, you know, subduing and not subduing and being successful at subduing and then being a failure at subduing, by 1206, Genghis Khan emerges as the leader of these people. And from that point on, we start to think of them as the Mongols. But your question wasn't that. Your question was, what were they like before they became the Mongols? They're just hunters and herders. They lived on the steppe, and it's a really harsh environment, you know, desert, mountains, extreme temperatures. Although living in Edmonton, they don't seem that extreme. -40,
yeah,
we have that. We still
true.
go to school in -40. You know, we're just as good as the Mongols. But I think they got +40 in the summer, which is a bit better than us. You know, so
a bit, yeah.
And same kind of probably thunder and lightning that we get. So I'm not that impressed. I'm just like, yeah, -40.
It was
through that every winter.
Sounds like he was a pretty tough guy, but
yeah, you know, tough people. They disliked, and they get no understanding at all for anybody that was settled. Like, they just couldn't understand why people would make a town and start farming. They're like, wow, why would you do that? You know, when you can wander through this territory on your little horsey. So they saw the main use for land was agriculture. Not no, I just said that wrong. They saw people using the land for agriculture, and they thought that the best use for land was pasturage for their horses. So they would, and you're thinking, well, they're coming into China, and China is just, you know, an agricultural wonderland, and by the Sung period, not interested in that at all. Just didn't see any value in it at all. So they're spread out geographically, naturally, because of the harshness of the territory. Lived in small groups of about 15 to 20 families, probably about that much. And their life really is dependent on the horse. The horses roamed free until they were needed. And in fact, it's said that horses outnumbered people in the time of Genghis Khan about 13 to 1. So horses, like all over the place. Shorter than European horses, kind of ugly by comparison to maybe Han horses or, you know, Arabian horses, kind of squat and useful, but they foraged for themselves. And when you have a horse that can go out and go through the drive-through window at McDonald's all by itself, pay and get home fully fed, I think you're doing okay.
That's
Don't
true.
you think
Yeah,
so? I mean, you know,
good.
foraging. For
I don't
yourself,
have a horse that can do that.
No, me neither. My car can't even do that. So their children, of course, could ride before they could walk. So everybody is doing everything on horseback. They didn't have towns because, of course, they don't see any value in that. They're on the move all the time. They had tent encampments, and their tents were called yurts, Y-U-R-T-S. Yurts. The yurts are really lovely inside if you've ever been in one in the modern period. But you could dismantle them within the hour, maybe even half an hour. So they could just break camp like that and be gone. They didn't do anything that could slow them down. They didn't forge metal. They didn't weave. They didn't, you know, haul pottery around with them. They didn't keep any animals except for the horses. They had a really, really simple diet. They did have alcohol because most societies seem to be able to develop that. In their case, they used fermented mare's milk in the summer and rice wine in the winter. So they would get that from their Chinese traders. And the women seem to have had a fairly good role to play in that society. They acted as advisors to the Khans at the top, and they were used in battle as well. So probably stop there. You think?
Yeah. It seems like there's a lot to talk about in terms of the Mongols, so we'll have to revisit that in our next episode.
Absolutely.
And until then, we'll see you later.
Okay. Bye.